Late start. You are 31. Your salary is the highest it has ever been, $74,000. And your net worth is roughly $9,000. Most of it sitting in a checking account you have been meaning to do something with for 3 years. The meaning to has not yet become the doing, and you are starting to understand that the distance between those two things is not a matter of information or intention. It is a matter of whether you have decided yet. You have not decided yet. You are not someone who avoided money on purpose. You thought about it constantly, actually. You thought about it the way you think about a leak in a ceiling you don't own. Aware of it, vaguely stressed by it, not quite sure whose job it is to fix, and not quite ready to find out. You paid off the degree. You survived the years where the salary and the rent were having a competition to see which one could make you feel worse, and the answer was always both of them at once. You made it through the stretch where eating well and saving money felt like two things that could not coexist in the same month. You made it through all of it. And now you are here, earning more than you ever have, clearing $74,000 for the first time. And your net worth is $9,000, and you are not entirely sure how that happened except that it did. And now you are 31, and the number is starting to sit differently than it did at 28 or 29 or even last year. You open a compounding calculator on your phone, the same one everyone finds eventually. You type in $25 and $500 a month and 7%, and you watch the number appear at the end. Then you delete the 25 and you type 31. The final number drops by an amount that does not feel proportional to 6 missing years. You run it again because you want to believe you made an arithmetic error. You didn't. The 6 years cost more than 6 years of contributions because the money you didn't invest at 25 is the money that would have had the longest runway. The earliest dollars are the most expensive dollars to skip. The ones you put in at 25 would have had 4 decades to compound. The ones you put in at 31 get 34. The gap is not 6 years. The gap is 6 years of returns on every dollar you would have invested, and then returns on those returns, and then returns on those, all the way out to the end. Nobody explained that at 25. At 25, you were trying to understand why the paycheck disappeared before the month did. And nobody was standing there to explain the other thing while you figured out the first one. So you sit with the number. The instinct is to feel behind, and behind arrives easily and settles quickly and helps with nothing at all. You set it down. You are not 25. You will not be 25 again. And no amount of resentment toward the version of yourself that did not know better produces a single dollar toward the version that does. The question is not how to recover what was lost in the years you did not invest. The question is what the decade directly in front of you is worth, and whether you will do something with it before it joins the one that is already behind you and unavailable. You decide that night. Not a plan yet. Not even a goal. A decision. Those 3 things feel similar, and they are not the same thing. A goal is something you want. A plan is the shape of how to get it. A decision is something you have already made. The planning can come after. The deciding has to come first, because without it the planning is just a document that gets revised and never acted on. You open a brokerage account and a Roth IRA in the same week. You move $400 in. It is not a triumphant amount. It will not appear impressive to anyone you tell about it. But it is the first dollar of yours that is working instead of waiting, and that distinction between working and waiting is the only distinction that is going to matter over the next 20 years. You set the transfer to automatic, the first of every month. Time to leave before you can have an opinion about it, before some other use for it can present itself and make a compelling case. You buy 3 index funds. Total U.S. market. Total international. A small bond allocation you barely think about. You do not check the prices the next morning. You have decided that checking daily is a hobby for someone else. You cancel 2 subscriptions you forgot were running. You call the insurance company and spend 22 minutes on hold and recover $40 a month on the car policy. Small leaks sealed without ceremony. Every dollar recovered from those leaks goes straight into the brokerage before it can develop a different plan for itself. You find a 3rd subscription, a 4th. You do not deprive yourself of things you actually use. You stop paying for things you stopped using and forgot to cancel, which it turns out is a meaningful category. Your savings rate, which was effectively 0 for most of your 20s, crosses 18%. Your net worth crosses $20,000 for the first time in your adult life. You are not euphoric about this. You expected to feel something larger, and you feel something quieter instead, something closer to relief than excitement. Like a knot that has been sitting in your shoulders for years has begun very slowly to loosen. Something has shifted. You can feel the difference between a number that sits in a checking account because it has nowhere else to be and a number that is in motion because you sent it somewhere on purpose. You are 33. You are doing something that the 25-year-olds cannot do yet. Not really. Not at the scale that matters. You are using your peak earning years instead of your peak energy years. And those are not the same years, and they are not worth the same thing in this particular game. You asked for a raise and got most of what you asked for. You changed jobs once for $14,000 more annually. And you did not upgrade the apartment to match the new number. Your rent went up $90 at renewal, and that was the only visible change in your external life. Everyone you know took the 30s income increase and spent it on a louder version of the same life. The bigger place, the newer car, the kitchen renovation on the apartment they don't own, the wardrobe that finally matches where they think they are. You spent it on a quieter version of the same life that looks almost identical from the outside and is doing something entirely different underneath. The savings rate climbs from 18% to 31%. Most of that climb does not come from earning more income. It comes from refusing to let the spending follow the income up the stairs the way everyone around you has allowed it to. This is the specific lever the late starter has that does not get discussed clearly enough. The 25-year-old has time and almost no money. You have money and less time. Money deployed in large amounts does a meaningful portion of what time does, not all of it, but enough of it to matter if you are consistent. A 35-year-old putting $2,000 a month into index funds is doing something a 22-year-old putting $400 a month into the same funds is not, even though the 22-year-old started first. The math of the late start is brutal at the front and surprisingly forgiving at the back if you are aggressive enough at the front to earn the forgiveness. Yours is aggressive because it has no other option. You buy the same funds on the same date every month. Automated. Barely thought about. The account grows whether you look at it or not. And you have discovered that looking at it less is its own form of discipline. Because the person who checks every morning is the person who eventually reacts to something they see on a Tuesday and makes a decision that costs them a decade. Net worth $71,000 and moving. You are 35. The market drops 29% over 8 months. Your portfolio falls from around $90,000 to roughly $64,000. On paper, $26,000 disappears. Not in a single day. Slowly, week after week, in a way that is almost worse than a sudden drop. Because every Monday gives you a new opportunity to feel it again, to absorb the updated number and sit inside it for another 7 days before the next one arrives. A coworker your age who started investing the same year you did sells everything in the worst week of the decline. He tells you he cannot afford to lose it, not at his age, not starting this late, that people like them do not get a second runway. You understand every word of the sentence. You feel the pull of it in your own chest, the specific gravity of the late starter's fear, which is not just about losing money, but about losing time you cannot recover, about the feeling that you were already playing with less margin than everyone else. And now the margin is being taken from you week by week. You don't sell a single share. You keep the automatic transfer running straight through the bottom, which means every dollar entering the account in those months is buying more shares than it did a year earlier, which means the recovery, when it comes, will be larger than it would have been if you had stopped. The late starter's first real crash is heavier than the early starters, and not because the percentage decline is different. It is heavier because the runway to recover feels shorter. Because the voice that says you do not have time to make this back is louder when you started at 31 than when you started at 23. Because the fear is not irrational. It is just wrong. The recovery does not consult your age. It does not check the year you opened the account or the number of years you have left. It only knows whether you were still in when it came. You were still in. 18 months later, the portfolio is past where it began before the drop. Your coworker is still climbing back toward a number he used to have, a number that was his before he decided it wasn't safe enough to hold. He will spend years catching up to where he already stood. Those are years he cannot spend twice on anything else. You won't spend them catching up. You will spend them compounding from a position that survived. Net worth $128,000. The median net worth for a household your age is somewhere near $135,000. 3 years ago, you were nowhere near the median. One crash, navigated without selling a single share, closed a gap that years of delay had opened. You are at the median. You did not get there by starting early. You got there by not stopping. You are 37. You earn $112,000. You live on roughly $58,000. The gap between those two numbers is the entire machine, and the machine is finally large enough to make its own noise without your help. Last year, the portfolio grew by roughly $19,000 before you contributed a single new dollar to it. The first time the account earns more in a calendar year than you could have saved from a full month of working, you read the statement twice. Then you set it down slowly. Not with fanfare, with something quieter than that. This is the moment the late start stops feeling like a debt you are perpetually paying off and starts feeling like a structure you are maintaining. Like something that now has its own weight and its own direction and no longer depends entirely on your monthly input to keep moving. You compressed nearly a decade of building into 6 years because you had the income to compress it with and the discipline not to spend the compression away. The 25-year-old's advantage was time. Yours was force. A higher savings rate, a higher income, a more aggressive allocation because you had less time to recover from anything and therefore stopped treating caution as a virtue and started treating it as a cost. Both roads, time and force, applied without stopping, arrive at the same destination. They just look different on the way, and yours had a different kind of difficulty in it. This is also the year the spreadsheet could not have modeled. It starts in February. Your mother needs a procedure, and the portion her insurance will not cover comes to $9,400. You are the child who can write the check. You write it without hesitating and feel the account register the absence, and then keep going. In June, the company reorganizes. Your role is folded into a restructured team, and you spend 3 months interviewing in stolen lunch hours. While performing calm in every meeting, sitting in rooms where decisions about your future are being made without your input while you act as though the floor is solid. You land the next role. It pays slightly less than the last one. You accept it without negotiating hard because you are tired and the floor stopped feeling solid 5 months ago, and you need it to be solid again. In September, a relationship of 3 years ends. Partly from the weight of everything that happened above it. Partly because somewhere inside the discipline and the automation and the monthly transfers you had let the purpose of the money drift away from you. Had started treating the accumulation as the point instead of as a tool. Had forgotten that money is supposed to serve a life and not quietly replace one by consuming all of your attention and none of your presence. You contribute less than half of what you planned this year. The portfolio grows anyway. The market does not read your calendar or feel anything about your February. It crosses $174,000. You sit with the slippage, the missed contributions, the quiet target date you had sketched for yourself sliding further out. Then you remember that the date was always invented and what it points toward is not. You adjust the plan. You keep the plan. That is the entire skill. And the late starter learns it earlier than most because the late starter has less runway to absorb the years that go sideways and therefore has to learn faster what to do when they do. Your mother is recovering, slower than before, but recovering. You were there for the parts that mattered. No spreadsheet was ever going to model those parts. The spreadsheet models the years when nothing happens except the compounding. The years when everything happens are yours to navigate on your own and then return from. You are 41. The portfolio reads $310,000. You did not arrive here by being early. You arrived by being consistent in the years you actually had, which were fewer than you would have chosen and enough. The thing about starting in your 30s is that you reach the same places the early starters reach, a few years later, carrying a different set of marks from the road. You don't have the 40-year tailwind. What you have instead is proof, built inside your own account, through your own crash, across your own catastrophic year. That proof tells you something about yourself that the balance sheet does not capture, which is that you can do this under pressure. That the version of you who feels the pull to sell and does not sell exists and has a track record now. That is worth more than the head start you didn't get because plenty of people who had the head start threw it away. And you had less margin and kept every piece of it. You are 44. Net worth just crossed $450,000. The number still lands differently than you expected it to when you were 31 and staring at $9,000 and trying to decide whether there was any point. It does not feel like wealth the way you imagined wealth would feel from the outside of it. It feels like options, like a particular kind of quiet, like the difference between going to work because the number demands it and going to work because you chose what you were doing. And you could stop the day you wanted to, and the number would not collapse without you. You are not at that place yet. You are at the edge of it, and you can see it from here. You are at dinner with two people you went to college with. One of them started investing at 23 and never missed a year, and talks about it the way people talk about a virtue they are tired of explaining to others. The other kept meaning to start, and is still meaning to at 44, and the meaning to is now carrying a different weight than it did at 31. Because the runway he has left is shorter, and he can feel it in a way he could not before. You are somewhere between them in the timeline and further along in the number than the one who kept meaning to, which is the only lesson the late starter ever needed to understand at the beginning. The race was never between you and the person who started at 22. The race was always between you and the version of yourself who was going to keep waiting one more year. You are 47, net worth $640,000. The two engines, what you earn from working and what the portfolio earns on its own, are now roughly equal in size. A sentence that would have felt like someone else's life to the 31-year-old sitting with a calculator and $9,000 and a sinking feeling that the window might already be closed. He was not too late. He was late. Those are different words. Late means you begin behind the pace you would have chosen and you close it with everything you have for as long as you have it. Too late means you decide the gap is a verdict and you use the verdict as permission to stop, to wait, to find reasons that the starting would have been different if only the conditions had been different. To spend the years you do have doing the math on the years you don't. The portfolio at this size has a different quality to it. A bad month is a number that adjusts and continues. A good quarter is a number that moves further than a year of your contributions used to move. The volatility that used to feel like a threat has become weather. You have been through enough of it to know what it does and does not do to you in the long run. And what it does not do is the part that matters. You know now that the permanent decisions made during temporary conditions are the ones that cost the most and take the longest to recover from, and are the ones the late starter can afford the least. You will not retire at 40. That door was not available, and there is no you standing in front of where it would have been. There is another door, and it opens later, and it opens into the same room. You are crossing into the part of your early 50s where the work becomes optional before it becomes impossible, where a layoff is an inconvenience instead of a disaster, where you stay in the job because you chose it, and you could leave the day you decided to, and the life would not unravel on the other side of that decision. The freedom arrives. It arrives differently than you pictured it when freedom was still theoretical. It arrives with more gray than the early retiree who posted about it at 41. It arrives every bit as real, every bit as functional, every bit as yours. You did not get the version with the longest runway. You got the version with the steepest grade, and you climbed it without stopping and arrived at the same elevation. You are 31 again in the memory of it. The calculator is still open. The number is smaller than it would have been if you had started earlier, if you had known sooner, if the decade you spent surviving had been a decade you spent building instead. You can feel the pull of the easy conclusion, that the missing years are a permanent verdict, that the math settled the outcome before you had a chance to participate in it, that people who start in their 30s are simply funding a slightly more comfortable version of the same arrival. You set the phone down instead. You make the transfer. The first $400 leaves the account that has only ever held money still and goes somewhere it will finally move. Outside, people your exact age are running the same calculation tonight and arriving at the easier answer. The one that says the window is probably closed. The one that says wait until things are more stable, until the income is higher, until the timing is better, until the conditions are closer to the ones they would have chosen if they had been choosing. The one that is wide and quiet and requires nothing of you tonight and leads nowhere by a route that is completely comfortable the entire way. They are not wrong that 31 is not 22. They are wrong about what follows from that. Behind implies a shared clock and a single finish line, and there is neither. There is only tonight and what you do with it, and the month after that, and what you do with it, and the crash that is coming at some point, and whether you will still be holding when it ends. There is only the transfer and the automation and the decision that keeps being remade every month, not as a choice, but as a structure you build early enough that it no longer requires a choice. The machine does not know how old you were when you walked in. It does not ask. It does not adjust your returns for your start date or apply a penalty for the years you spent not starting. It takes what you give it on the schedule you set, and it does what it has always done. You gave it something on a schedule you set in the years you actually had. That was enough. It was always going to be enough. The only question was whether you were going to find that out or spend the rest of the available years deciding that you probably weren't. You found out.